Good afternoon. It's actually good morning here in California. It's good to be with you, Peter.
Yeah, thanks. No apology necessary on the. We've been in this Zoom world for almost a year now, and everyone's had their issues with not being on mute and so forth. I really appreciate you taking the time out as an elected district attorney to join us. Thank you so much. It's really great. You're actually the first elected official in the law enforcement world to join us from California, where Marcys Law actually started in 2008. So we really appreciate your being able to tell us a little bit about Marcys Law in California. You're the district attorney of San Luis Obispo County, but you have some roots in New England and Massachusetts.
That's right. I was born in Gloucester, Mass. My family moved back to Maine, where my father was raised when I was 3. So I grew up in Maine and ended up leaving New England, though, to join the Army back in right after high school. So I still got family there, but we're transplants to California, and we love it out here.
Yeah, and I should probably first recognize, and being out there in California, you guys are getting hit really hard with the coronavirus and the challenges that you have to deal with as the district attorney, and still working and running an office the way that you're doing in these challenging times is tough. And it actually hit you personally. We were supposed to have this interview before Christmas, and you got the coronavirus.
That's right. And our family was quarantined for a couple of weeks, and it was, a bit of a challenge, but it also just shows how real this emergency is, this pandemic is across our country. And we have to continue to thank our health workers, professional healthcare workers, doing all the great work they are, working 24/7 to support our community and communities all across the country and the globe.
Yeah, well, thank God that you're doing great, and for your leadership too. It's tough to run an office, for a district attorney's office, anyways, and all of a sudden, this is a job description that you never thought you would have to have as part of your job description as district attorney, trying to run a prosecutor's office during a pandemic and all. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges as far as live testimony in front of court? Is it non-evidentiary hearings being done Zoom wise? How is it working over there?
Sure. Well, initially we pretty much had a hold on public hearings at, completely, a complete hold. And then our courts were fairly quick to adopt going to Zoom, although it was difficult. They'd never done a remote hearing except for some arraignments to our county jail before that. And initially it was a little rocky. We still tried to have a mix of people in court and people appearing online. And all jury trials were stopped for a while, all hearings as well that required a witness for a brief amount of time. But our court was really flexible and did everything they could to adapt to this new reality. And believe it or not, we've been able to put on 20 jury trials during the pandemic prior to the end of the year. And we have some about to start again right now in the first of the year. So all the hearings, unless they're contested evidentiary hearings, are done by Zoom or a similar technology where both the defense and the prosecution appears remotely. But out of our 7 courtrooms, we have, I think, 3 of them that are live every day with parties there. They've limited, the audience can't really have very many members of the public. It's very limited on who can go in. People are wearing masks, and in most courtrooms, the witness on the witness stand can remove their mask for the testimony. And it's been challenging. Quite frankly, the biggest challenge, I think, has been getting juries. Of the several hundred or maybe 1,000 summons that go out, you may have 50 or 60 people respond. And so it's been a challenge to get a pool of jurors. But with 20 trials over about 8 months, I think that's a testament to the cooperation and the collaboration between the courts, the defense attorneys, and all of our other partners.
And then also the coordination that it takes, even under the most perfect circumstances, to put together a criminal case from the perspective of a prosecutor, with the victim witness coordination. That brings even more challenges, does it not?
Sure does, absolutely. And victims, survivors of crime, after they've dealt with something that's probably the most difficult thing that they've had to deal with, they want an opportunity to be heard. And it's important that even in a pandemic, that we still have the courts open with access to justice, for people that need access to the courts, and victims are a tremendous part of that. And so our victim witness office has done a great job of using technology to communicate with victims and witnesses, but then also communicating with them on the day-to-day changes. Sometimes we've got a hearing scheduled, and at the very last minute, it has to be postponed. And so our staff is working very hard to make sure that they're informed. And while we're not perfect, we do a really good job at keeping our victims at the forefront of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, you really do a great job of running a victim-focused office and a victim-centric office. And I want to get into that in a little bit, but I think for the people who are watching this, it's important to note that you really have the law, and specifically being a prosecutor, in your blood, going all the way back when you were in Maine. You told me a story about you started to become interested in the law when you were in 5th grade. You were taking an American history class, and you were reading about the founders and the Constitution. And some kids, and they get excited about law school or at a certain age, maybe in high school or college. You actually wanted to become a lawyer, and you actually took some affirmative steps as a 5th grader to reach out to law schools. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't know a lawyer. I'd never met one. We grew up in a real small town, about 800 people. And yet it was during that 5th grade American government, American history classes that I just fell in love with the principles behind our Constitution, and learning how it was created, learning about the Revolutionary War, and hearing about lawyers like Abraham Lincoln that did tremendous work for our country, for freedom, and for our justice system. And so I had a strong interest and decided to write to law schools, and I sent letters to at least one in California that piqued my interest, and asked them for information about how to become a lawyer. And so I remember getting a letter back from them and a catalog about the school describing the program of study. And so later on, I had a little bit of a derailment. I didn't know if that was going to happen. I joined the military, but at a critical point later, when I was doing something very different, and the economy tanked, I had an opportunity to go to law school, and I haven't ever looked back. It's been a very rewarding career. I love what we do, because as prosecutors, our number one goal is to seek the truth in every case. Our goal is not to win a case. Our goal is to seek the truth and have that come out. And that's very freeing as a lawyer, knowing that you're not trying to make money for a client. And that can be totally fine and worthy as well. But to me, I get the feeling of, look, our goal is to seek the truth and to help victims and our community stay safe.
And you've prosecuted cases abroad as well.
I have. I am also a JAG attorney in the United States Army National Guard, and was in Iraq for a year from 2010 to 2011. Prosecuted 3 court-martials while I was there under combat conditions, and that was quite an experience, and one that I'll always look back to with, quite frankly, good memories, tough memories. Some people obviously didn't come home. Our unit was fortunate to have everybody come home, but not our larger unit that we were a part of. And so, yeah, I've got some really significant memories of that experience in Iraq.
Yeah, well, obviously, thank you for your service and your dedication to the country, and then to your county and to the victims of your county is something that is so appreciated. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your victim-centric office that you've created. You have a victim assistance center, and I think you were telling me that back in 1977, you were one of the first 2 counties in the entire state of California to develop a victim witness advocate position, victim witness assistance center. I think it was your county in Alameda County. Tell us a little bit about how you structure your office around victims.
Well, first, Peter, I want to give the kudos to the DAs that came before me here in this office. And Christopher G. Money was the number 2 in the office right before becoming an elected DA. He worked with the then DA in Alameda County in 1976 and 77 to form a new program called Victim Witness Assistance. And so we're a mid to small size county. Presently we have about just under 300,000 citizens in our residents in our county. So we're not the biggest, but we've always kind of had an approach to wanting to be innovative and do new things. So I'm proud of the fact that our county, being fairly rural, came up with this and was a cutting edge. And later on, the legislature began to endorse the idea, in fact, provide programs to support every county into obtaining a victim witness assistance center in their counties. So the credit really goes to my predecessors, but because of their hard work, I've had a long commitment to victims in our community. Our Victim Witness Assistance Center has about 16 victim advocates, and those are the individuals that are they're really a liaison from our office to the victim or the survivor, keeping them informed as to the process, where we are, when there's going to be a hearing, how they can obtain a claim with our Victims Compensation Claims Board for restitution, letting them know when they need to testify. We even have now a courthouse dog in our Victim Witness Center that is there when we have to do perhaps a child forensic interview with a child victim of abuse, or it could be anyone else, quite frankly, a support dog that can be there. And so our office tries to do everything that we do with asking the question, how's this going to affect the victim in this case?
Yeah, and Marcys Law actually started in California, as we talked about. It's the home of our founder, Dr. Henry Nicholas, and the home of his sister Marsy, who's our inspiration and for whom Marcys Law is named. And so you've had the opportunity. I think you started in Riverside County as a deputy district attorney before Marcys Law was enacted. Then you were a deputy district attorney after and while Marcys Law was enacted. And you've also had the experience and continue to have the experience as an elected district attorney in a state where Marcys Law is working. Tell us a little bit about how it works for you, how it's worked when you were a deputy DA, and how it has affected your office for the positive as an elected DA.
Well, you know, when I became a prosecutor, a big reason for wanting to be a prosecutor was wanting to help victims, people who had gone through a real tragic circumstance, and help them through it and hold the offenders accountable that caused that tragedy to happen. And so I think prosecutors have always cared about victims, you know, and that's been a big part of their passion. But our procedural system and our court cultures didn't always take into account the impact that even the process had on victims. So before Marcys Law, victims were important. But afterwards, with Marcys Law putting into our California Constitution these enumerated rights, it provided a mechanism now for us to always have the victim in mind from the very beginning through every step of the process. And so I think it just gave us now a tool and a process to never forget or never lower in terms of our priority the impact on the victim. And so from the very beginning now, we didn't do this before. We always contacted victims, but now at the very beginning, within just a very short time frame, our victim advocates reach out to every victim and advise them of their Marcys rights. And we check a little form if they want to assert some of their rights. Now, some victims may say, you know what, it happened. I only want to know when the case is resolved. I don't really want to be involved. And so we'll make note of that. But if they want to be heard, if they want to come in and give an impact statement, then we're letting them know, we're asking them if they want that. And all the way through, we're making sure that we are communicating with them. Again, you know, I mentioned earlier, we're not perfect. The system is vast. We have, you know, thousands and thousands of cases, so thousands of victims, but we work very hard to keep them informed as to the process as it goes, and making sure that all their questions are answered, their concerns are answered. And I find that it's been a big help to ensure that victims are at the forefront instead of someone that we might forget to keep involved.
Well, I'll say, Dan, that I spent 13 years in the district attorney's office in Boston, and I was a prosecutor there. And I've seen, because of my experience at Marcys Law, district attorneys all across the country, offices. And your office really has set quite a standard. It really is the platinum standard when it comes to the way that you include victims as an integral part of the process, and the way that you keep victims informed. I mean, even if you go on the website of the Office of District Attorney Dan Dow, there are so many resources there at their fingertips. I noticed that you link to Marcys Law, you link to Marcy's story. You actually have a link that directs you to a Marcy's card that you can print out in 23 different languages. It really is incredible the way that you have conformed your office, and your office is always so responsive to victims, and the way that you've done it is really commendable.
Well, we appreciate that. You know, again, it takes a commitment, and I know that my staff, you know, it's a commitment of mine to be victim focused. And in fact, right now, if you just look, Peter, at what we've had over the last several years, there's a lot of change, a lot of reforms to the justice system that have been very offender focused. And while those are important, what I've realized is that we've kind of put victims behind the offender in terms of our priorities. As legislatures and Congress are looking at reforms, they're pretty much offender focused. And I think part of that is just kind of subtle. We haven't really maybe intentionally done that. And, you know, we call this the criminal justice system. I have a staff member who was an advocate before she transitioned to another role. And she said, Dan, when I talk to victims and they're frustrated, I'll tell them, you know, it's not called the victim justice system, it's called the criminal justice system. And so she was empathizing with them. And when she described that to me, I said, you know, we should start across the country. And so in my office, we're trying to change the name of the system to the criminal and victim justice system. Again, so that it might be subtle, but so that we're not forgetting the victim as we're talking about our system. So when we have meetings with our court partners that include the judge, you know, the Superior Court presiding judge, the criminal team leader, the public defender, the sheriff's office, and we talk about things, it's usually our office that's bringing up, hey, we can't leave the victim out. We need to make the victim a major part of consideration when we're looking at dealing with a procedure or a new type of issue that the justice system is dealing with. So I'd encourage those listening to begin to refer to our system as the criminal and victim justice system, and that'll have at least a incremental effect at making sure that they're very high on our priority list and as important as looking at the impact on offenders.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea, and it's really reflected in the way, like I said, that you lead your office. I mean, you have on your website, you have ways that people can you give tips on how to actually start thinking about a victim impact statement and how to do that. And you have ways to stay informed and to stay notified. You know, one of the things I wanted to ask you was, as a district attorney who implements Marcys Law through your victim witness advocates and your prosecutors on a daily basis, and as someone who has experienced it as a deputy DA as well, what would you say to district attorneys in states that we go around the country in Marcys Law and we start to go into another state to think about passing Marcys Law and get meaningful and enforceable constitutional rights for victims in those states, to a DA who this is new to them, the Marcys Law is new to them, but the concept of victims' rights is not. What would you say to them when they said, how is this going to affect my office? This is going to be too much. There's going to be too many extra things for me to do, and I'm not going to be able to pull it off.
Sure. Well, I can understand someone who hasn't yet had the opportunity to work with Marcys Law to be concerned about that. But quite frankly, from my experience, both as being a deputy DA and now as the elected, it really didn't overly burden the office at all. And in fact, it gave us, as I alluded to before, a framework for which to talk to the community about why victims' rights are so important, because now they're embedded into our Constitution. When we're talking about human trafficking or domestic violence or sexual abuse or elder financial abuse, we now have the ability to bring the strength of these rights being embedded in our Constitution to argue to the court for consideration of the impact on victims, for making sure that victims have a voice and that they have an opportunity to be heard. So in my mind, it actually gave us more of a significant ability to argue for victims, which we were doing before anyway. And in terms of the impact on your staff, if you don't have you know, a whole lot of victim advocates that are able to reach out and ask this questionnaire about and notify them of their rights and find out what they want to do, then I'd encourage you to, work with your the people that give you your budget, and hopefully they'll also buy into the fact that these are important rights. But in addition to that, there are probably volunteer organizations in your community that would love to help out. So I would say look outside the box. If it's a resource issue, find some other partners and ways to get volunteers screened that can work in your office on a volunteer basis. Because I know for small offices with a very limited budget, resources are a huge concern. But view this as an opportunity to really highlight the good work that you're already doing and get the support of the legislature and the people of your state behind it. And I think right now more than ever, with so much talk about criminal justice reform, we need to ensure that the victims are at the forefront. So I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful, and it's great the way that you articulated it. And you're known as one of the more creative and innovative district attorneys around, and you've implemented and created a lot of different programs in your office. And you talked about human trafficking, and your office created under your leadership an anti-human trafficking task force. And January being Human Trafficking Awareness Month, could you tell us a little bit about, because when I talk to people, I'm on the Children's Advocacy Center board here in Boston, and we deal a lot with the human trafficking issue. And when you talk to people and raise awareness about it, people are shocked that this actually happens close to them in any way. Could you tell us a little bit about human trafficking, how prevalent it is, and what your office is doing to help victims of it?
Sure, and you're absolutely right. People here, we've got a wonderful community. Ever since we brought this to the public's attention about 6 years ago, or 7 now, people were saying, oh, that doesn't happen here. That just happens in the big city. But we've had numerous cases of young teenage victims being trafficked either from our county or into our county from other areas. And it is happening everywhere. We had our task force do an online assessment about a year ago of online ads for basically selling people for sexual exploitation in our community, and the numbers were staggering. This was on a Wednesday in the middle of the week. Actually, they did the census for a whole week time frame. I'm thinking as well as our sting operation that we did. And during that sting on noon on a Wednesday, a work day, at the very early part of the pandemic this last year, we had dozens and dozens in our great community of people that were responding to these sting ads, quite frankly. We ended up having 8 arrests of people that were trying to purchase another human being in our community. And it's going on everywhere. So you might think you have a great community and it's not happening. I guarantee if you put some resources into it, you'll find that it is. And so we have a victim advocate that is specifically trained in trafficking victims, who goes out on any of the human trafficking investigations and is able to immediately meet and talk with the victim. As you could imagine, the victims of trafficking often are stuck. They are entrenched in something that they don't know how to get out of. They don't necessarily view law enforcement as friendly initially. And so we work really hard on just trying to build trust and letting them know that we're here to help them in any way that we can. And our specifically assigned victim advocate that goes out on those really is the one that's able to do, I think, the most good, along with those officers that are specifically trained in dealing with them. But we're there for the long haul. We've got some of these cases that take a couple of years to get all the way to final resolution. And, they're sometimes in and out of treatment or in and out of therapy and that sort of thing. And we've got to be there for them for the long haul, because the significant impact on them psychologically is huge. And our task force began in 2014. And another big benefit of our task force was training of law enforcement. Law enforcement used to kind of view what they would see on the streets as being just 2 consenting adults kind of thing, instead of creating a demand for sexual services that ends up being filled by juvenile victims time and time again. And so anyway, it's something that we're very passionate about. I'm proud of the hard work of our task force and specifically our victim advocates that are going out there to work with those victims.
Well, it's really a testament to your leadership to have that recognition that it takes, that these are different kinds of cases. and to create a task force that is dedicated specifically to this, and then even more specifically to specifically train victim witness advocates, because there's a unique sensitivity to these cases, in order to give the initial support, to build the initial trust, and to empower those victims, like you said, who are vulnerable, juvenile in a lot of cases, tragically, victims who the criminal and victim justice centers, you talk about it, is so foreign and intimidating and daunting anyways. But in cases like this, in order to build that trust does take a unique kind of skill set. And the fact that you recognize that, I think, is really, really important. And the other thing is, like you said, these cases take a little while. I found one of the cases that you did recently, and this is really just shows why you need to do what you do with respect to victims and staying in touch with victims. You had a case where somebody fled, they were out on bail in a human trafficking case, and you recently brought them back. They were extradited. You found them in Florida because while they were out on bail, they actually had contact with the victim that had been prohibited by the court. Can you tell us quickly about that?
Sure. I'll just say that, because it's a pending case, I'll be careful. But what's public is the fact that, yes, we had a filed case, and the defendant was out of custody. We've had a difficulty keeping people in custody, primarily because of the pandemic and the concern about people being exposed in court. So he had very low bail and was out. Because of the subsequent conduct, we were able to file a new charge. We were able to get a bail, with a bail motion, get bail increased so that we could keep the person in custody, hopefully, at least to protect the victim because of the seriousness of the new allegation. And our task force law enforcement team worked very closely with law enforcement across the country. We were able to track this person down to Florida. He was arrested in Florida and then extradited back here to California. And on that point, I will just say that our commitment to victims and to our community in terms of public safety is that we will not stop until looking for someone, for an offender, until we're able to find them and bring them back, whether it's in Florida or whether it's like in a homicide case where we brought back a man from Mexico and just he was sentenced this week to 24 years and 8 months in prison because of his involvement in a conspiracy to commit murder. So
and that was a 7-year-old case, wasn't it?
That's right, from 2013. So we're continually committed to supporting victims in our community, regardless of how long it takes.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking so much of time out of your busy day. I want to thank you again for your service to our country, for your service to the county and to victims and to the criminal and victim justice system, and also just showing people how Marcys Law works, why Marcys Law was really created. You do that every day, and it really is it's really heartening to see that you do that, and you set a great example for other district attorneys, not just in California, but for district attorneys all around the country, where we have Marcys Law and where we'd be looking to implement Marcys Law in the future. So thank you so much for all of that.
Peter, just real quick, I also sit on the board of directors for the California District Attorneys Association. I just kind of want to give a quick plug. It's a tremendous organization that trains our prosecutors and our victim advocates and our investigators all over the state. And this year we're working on making it the year of the victim, to really bring awareness to the impact of crime on victims and survivors across our state, so that we get their stories out. And so that will hopefully help to shape the legislation and our community's response to criminal justice matters in our community.
That's fantastic. And you know that we're always here at Marcys Law to highlight all the great work that you do and continue to do for victims.
Well, thank you very much. I wish you a wonderful 2021, and we're praying for an end to this pandemic.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, Dan.
Thank you, Peter.
Have a nice day.
You too.